Alright, today we're going to be cleaning and inspecting a carburetor on a 1996 Kawasaki KX80, and it'll fit a lot of the two-stroke Kawasaki KX80 motorcycles. But the first thing we're going to do is we pulled the carburetor and the throttle off of the motorcycle. We wouldn't have to pull this throttle housing off, but we just want to do that to show you everything here. So we've got the cable running into the top here. The first thing we're going to do is pull this cable off of here. So spin this cap off. It's an aluminum cap, and as you do that, you notice the slide raising. So we're pulling the slide and everything out together. So we've got your slide here in hand, and then I kind of pull until I get to the bottom of the spring, and then I pinch the bottom of the spring with my thumb against the cable. So you've got a clip down in there, kind of the shape of an E, a backwards E, and you can grab pliers. Sometimes you can just set your slide upside down like that and shake it. Sometimes that clip will come off, but a lot of times you'll have to grab pliers here and lift up on that clip. So we've got that clip taken out there. That's what it looks like. That groove sits down, and kind of this groove right here sits and holds that cable into place. So as soon as we have that clip out of there, now what we're going to do is pull up as far as we can on that spring. That way we can push our thumb in that throttle cable as far down as we can and slide it out of that groove there. So going back together, you just want to pull that cable as hard as you can with this hand, pinch it between your spring and your cable there using your thumb, and push that cable all the way as far down into that groove as you can get, and then slide it into the middle there. So that is the slide and needle and pulling that throttle cable out. Now we're going to go to the rest of the carburetor. We've 10 millimeter here, loosen this lock nut and just spin this cap off. And that is off there. We've got the throttle cable off of the carburetor now. And we're going to flip this upside down and pull this bottom bowl off. So 4 Phillips screws, and sometimes people seem to think we've got to over tighten these screws. So if you can't get them off with a Phillips screwdriver, try as hard as you can, just because you don't want to use vice grips if you don't have to. Sometimes you damage that screw when you use vice grips, but also if you can't get the screw off, grab a pair of small vice grips. You can clamp down on here, just giving yourself a little room to turn is all you need, because a lot of times once you kind of break that free, the first 1/16 of a turn, and they'll come right out. So pull these bottom screws here. We've got a nipple on the bottom of this bowl here that your overflow fuel will come out of there, and that you want to make sure you've got a hose draining to the bottom side of your motor. You don't want this fuel draining directly on top of your motor, discolor your motor, pull the paint off of there, or start a fire. So we've also got a cap down here that you can use to drain the fuel out of your carburetor. You don't want to pull this cap thinking you're going to clean the carburetor, because you're not going to do a very good job cleaning ports out doing that. So also, if your motorcycle is bouncing around on the trailer or the back of the pickup, fuel will dump out this tab here and dump out your overflow. That's why sometimes when you set your bike on your center stand, when you lift it up, or side stand, fuel will come out. Fuel will just slosh around in here and comes out this bottom tab. Next, we're going to pull this float here, and this is the float. You want to make sure there's no cracks in that float. Make sure it's not damaged in any way. And go ahead and push this pin out. I just got small pliers here to do that. You don't want to use a lot of force. These tabs right here are aluminum. They break very easily, so you want to make sure that those don't get hit very hard. We've got your float here, and it's got an adjustment, so you can stop fuel if you need to a little bit easier. If your bike is constantly dripping fuel in the trailer, you might want to think about lowering your needle, which would be pushing this tab down slightly. And you don't want to do much because you don't want to starve your bike for fuel. So you can do that, but you don't. If you need a needle and seat, don't just keep on pushing down on that tab, or your carburetor won't work right. So we've got your needle here, and sometimes these get grooved on here on the end. Sometimes debris sits down in here on your seat. This is a removable seat you pull out with your Phillips screwdriver. You've got fuel coming in here from your fuel tank, and it's going to go directly into there. So you can take compressed air, blow through it, and you can see that fuel comes out that seat there. You also want to make sure there's no chunks of rubber, sand, anything that was in the fuel tank doesn't get caught up here. Next thing we're going to do is grab a 6mm wrench or socket and pull this main jet. And this main jet, you want to make sure that when you hold it up to light, you can see through it. If you can't, or either way, you want to, it's good practice to just blow compressed air through it just to clean out any debris that could be building up. Also, you can use gum out carbon choke cleaner, spray through it, just make sure that you can get all the way through it. Make sure you can see when you hold it up to light. Next is going to be your pilot jet down here, all the way down inside your carburetor. Grab a small screwdriver, make sure that you're on it really tight before you start turning it. You don't want to strip that screw out, that can cause damage. Dump that out. This is the pilot jet. Same thing, you want to make sure that you can see through it. Take compressed air, blow through it, make sure you hang on to it really tight so it doesn't go flying. And this is a very small port, so you'll make sure you get that clean. If your bike's hard to start, more than likely your pilot jet's plugged up. So then you can blow through all these ports, make sure they're clear of any debris. So we'll put this bottom side back together here, and then we'll go through the rest of the carburetor. Tighten down your pilot jets. Again, your carburetor is going to be sitting upside down from what it is now. So these jets, you want to make sure that they're good and snug so they don't work itself out, but also they're brass. Going into aluminum, you don't need to crank on them. So put your seat down in there, or your needle down inside your seat. And you can grab your pin and your float here. And this float, you want to make sure this tab is up. What that does, this little tab here hits that post so your float doesn't drop down all the way. All right, we've got everything tightened up. We can double check it just to make sure. We'll put your bowl back on there. Oops. And then put your 4 screws back in. These 4 screws with this gasket, make sure that gasket on the bottom of your bowl, or the top of your bowl, I guess, make sure that that's in good condition before going back together. If you got a carb repair kit ordered, a lot of times those gaskets will come with it. Just put a new one in there. It's always good to have a new, fresh one in there, because that fuel heating and cooling the motor will eventually ruin that gasket, and you could have fuel leaking onto your motor. So we've got your idle adjust here, and I'll show you by putting the slide back in there what that does. So I'll put the clip. I'm not going to put the cable in this time. I've already showed you how to do that. Whoops, this clip was upside down. And make sure these tabs are on the bottom. The slide and the needle there, they can only go in one direction. Then make sure you've got an O-ring here on your cap. Spin that on. Those are fine threads. You want to make sure that you've got it threaded the right direction. Next, we'll pull this choke here, and that's a 14mm. Loosen that up, and then we've got a Phillips screw right here. Just going to loosen that for now. This is your choke, so that's the up position, or that's the choke position there. When it pulls that plunger up, that means choke, and it's allowing more air and fuel through there. So there is the cap there. Yeah, we're going to have to pull this screw. There's the screw there. And there's the plunger, and that goes down into the choke area. This does. Now you saw there's a ball that dropped out. What that is a spring loaded right here, and that keeps this keeps the choke locked into either on or off. So if you don't have that bowl in there, your float can just go up and down freely, and you don't want that. So you want to make sure you keep that ball there and keep it into place. When you're going back together, make sure that that ball is in the correct place. Put this Phillips screw, and it's kind of you got a specialty spacer so that it doesn't actually tighten down onto this lever, so you can still turn it if you tighten it down without that ball in there. Or if you tighten it down without that spacer, you're not gonna be able to move your choke. So see there, that ball will snap into place depending on where you're at. So 14 millimeter again, tighten these down. And your carburetor is all set for your KX80 motorcycle.